Us, you're just in time for the big conversation here on KTN Prime. Now I'm joined by a man who is not new to your screens, a man who is known by almost each and every Kenyan. I'm speaking about Honorable Okiya Omtatah, who refers to himself as a senator of the Republic of Kenya from the great county of Busia. A very good evening to you, sir. Many thanks for making time.
Good evening to you.
It's been a minute. Many say you've really kept a low profile in the past few months, Senator. What have you been up to?
Well, since Baba died, I took a low profile because Baba's death unleashed a lot of energy. Too many black holes, you can easily sink into it. Mm-hmm. So I think that energy is now burning out, and soon we should be able to move forward again.
Fair enough. Of course, welcome to KTN, the home of the bold.
But I've kept quiet in terms of addressing media. I think since Baba died, this is the second time I'm appearing on screen. Mm-hmm. And I've also, but I've been very busy in other arena, away from the media, trying to do some of the work that needs to be done to fix this country now, without waiting for 2027. So there's a lot that can be done now, mm-hmm, to contain and to sober up and to make sure that the governance serves the people. So we can't just wait for 2027. There'll be no country by then. So I've been doing a lot of that also.
Fair enough. And when you talk about doing a lot of that, one would assume one of the things is, of course, the case which will be before court, the High Court on Thursday, that is the privatization of the Kenya Pipeline Corporation. Now, some argue, Senator, that this will be an exercise in futility because the process is already done and dusted.
No. Under the Constitution, there's no fait accompli. If it's unconstitutional, it's null and void. It's not done and dusted, and I think as a result of that litigation, if you go to Kenya Pipeline now, even the new owners, the purported new owners have not moved in. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of uncertainty. Everybody's looking at this case. They don't know how it's going to go. Because it's a foundational case. It's not just a simple case that touches Kenya Pipeline. It's a case that deals with the very concept of privatization. And the question we're asking the court to answer is, can you take something that has been developed by the collective and then allow it for elite capture? For those who have got money to buy it, after it has been developed by the money of everybody. Those kind of concepts need to be unbundled. There's the role of the IMF in the whole thing. Mm-hmm. The IMF, as you know, the IMF is a debt collector. It's a debt collector. There's nothing about IMF. It collects debt. It comes to an area where a country has fallen into debt, it cannot pay, then it comes in and says, do this, collect taxes, stop providing services, do this, so that you can have enough money to pay debtors. So as a debt collector, IMF is coming into auction the country. So we're also challenging the IMF and whether the IMF can sit pretty with our constitution the way we have it today. So there are quite a number of issues we want to deal with, because if we don't do that, then it will be a free fall. We are asking questions like, can the government, using the treaty-making powers, enter into arrangements that are unconstitutional? So those are kind of things we want to be determined in that case. So the KPA privatization becomes, the KPC privatization becomes a small aspect, although it's the main trigger, but it becomes a small aspect of what we are trying to determine in terms of what the Constitution allows, what the Constitution does not allow, what the government can do, what the government cannot do within the construct of the Constitution. And that's why me have said, whoever thinks the race is done within a cage. The race is not done outside the cage, and the cage is the laws of this country. So the laws will have to be, the final say will have to be from the law to tell us exactly whether today, with the current Constitution the way it sits, you can conceptualize a privatization of a public asset.
Well, the concern is also the process of privatization, and you argue that it cannot be done through a sessional paper, but legislation.
Yes, of course. You know, there's something, you know, since I went to Parliament, I've been seeing a lot of funny things happening. We spend a lot of time on things called statements, things called motions. We write reports. And all these things, we pass resolutions, and they go nowhere. There's no mechanism to enforce. But when you go to the Constitution, Article 109, Clause 1. First of all, before you go there, Article 94, Clause 5 says that only Parliament has the power to make anything that has got the force of law in Kenya. The President cannot make law, the judges cannot make law, the commissions cannot make law, only Parliament can make law. Then, if you go to 109, Clause 1, it says, legislative power, Parliament exercises its legislative power through bills approved by Parliament and signed into law by the President. So among the questions I'm saying, when you say you're going to privatize Kenya Power using sessional paper, what's a sessional paper? What power is Parliament exercising with sessional papers? Well, it could work in Britain and other constitutions, but now Constitution is prescriptive that if Parliament has to exercise its legislative power, then that thing must come in as a bill. And a bill, as you know, has got several readings, it has got very rigorous processes of clearing it. So you cannot just come and say that the parliamentarians have sat somewhere and passed something. You see, like one of the things we are dealing with is debt, the question of debt. If you go to the Constitution, I think it's Article 220, 221, it's very clear, any borrowing must be in the budget with mechanism of how it is going to be paid. It should be clearly spelled out in the budget. You are borrowing for this, you are going to do this. Now, you'll get that there's something called a budget policy paper that comes to Parliament.
Okay.
One has just left Parliament recently. Now, they say, basically the argument is that it is something that was created by Parliament, that you need a budget policy paper to give the government a broad boundary within which it can borrow money. Then now when the Parliament goes and proposes the budget, then it comes through the constitutional structures, 220 and 221, it becomes a budget. But now what happens is that the budget policy paper, the government proposes so many things. They want to borrow this, they want to do this, they want to do that. So Parliament says, okay, within that framework you can borrow. Now, after the budget is done,
okay,
the cabinet secretary now goes, then there's something very clever that they did in the so-called Public Finance Management Act. If you look at section 49, they say that the cabinet secretary can borrow using the budget policy statement. Now, when does Parliament, what power is Parliament exercising when it is dealing with the statements? You see, this just comes as a statement before committees and is passed. It doesn't come as a bill. The Constitution says you must deal with these things through a bill passed by Parliament and signed into law by the President. Now, we avoid all that. We do very many things on the side and we do whatever. Then we create room for stealing. So the cabinet secretary comes and says, it was in the budget policy paper. It was a proposal that you could borrow up to so much. The budget has only, Parliament has just allowed me to borrow 10 shillings. In the budget policy statement, I had requested for 100 shillings. So why don't I borrow the remaining shillings, 10 or 20 or whatever, 100, 80, 90, borrow it, and it becomes a debt. And that room has been used to borrow a lot of money. Then again, when you go to Article 50, Section 50, Clause 7 of the same Act, Public Finance Management Act, they say that the cabinet secretary can decide to borrow money outside and keep the money offshore. The Constitution itself says any money raised by Parliament, loan, grants, whatever, taxes, must go to the consolidated fund, so that it is controlled by Parliament and the control of budget. But again, this law allows the cabinet secretary, first of all, to borrow outside the budget and to keep the money offshore. And a lot of stealing is going on. So money is borrowed, it never comes here. What they bring is the debt. So we keep on having to pay debt, keep on having to pay debt. So these are among the things we are trying to push and say that, can a sessional paper, which was used to privatize Kenya Power, can a sessional paper which never came as a bill, be the basis of the law that is being used to privatize a state corporation? That's also among the questions the court has to answer. Those are the things we are dealing with in court.
Fair enough. But again, Senator, Kenyans out there are looking at their representatives in both houses of parliament and most with the National Assembly. The concern here is also that, the National Assembly has been captured in a way, because most of the time, if the government of the day, the executive, wants something to go through the House, then you're more than sure that it will definitely, because they have the, the power in terms of numbers. So how can we, solve that problem? Because it is something that is of great concern to Kenyans out there.
That's a very important question, because even if you look at your body, your own body, there's a design. Your body is a very good machine, very well designed, and it functions that way. If you took your hands and put one here, and put the other one here, so that you can, maybe you look unique, but I don't know how that body will function. So that design is important. Our Constitution has got a very clear design in terms of what they call separation of powers. The power of the executive, the power of the pass of the money, and the power of the adjudication, the judges,
okay,
the judiciary. Now you find that, again, the same parliament, when they were operationalizing Article 225, Clause 1 of the Constitution, which requires Parliament to establish an independent treasury, they decided to use the Public Finance Management Act, not to set up an act for the treasury like the CBK Act. They didn't do that. Instead, they created a treasury within the Public Finance Management Act. And when you look at Section 11 of the Public Finance Management Act, you find that they say that the treasury is the cabinet secretary for finance, responsible for finance, and the principal secretary, and the departments.
Okay.
Now, when you go to the same constitution in under 152, I think it says that the cabinet secretary is accountable to the president. So, if the cabinet secretary is the head of the treasury, and is accountable to the president, then who is the treasurer? It's the president. You find that the treasury was never meant to be a ministry of the national government. It was supposed to be an independent body. That's why it is created at 225, and the ministries are created at 152. So that distance alone should have told us that these are two different organizations. But for some reason, Parliament made the treasury part of the national government. Mm-hmm. Automatically, it disadvantages the county governments, because the treasury is supposed to serve the 47 counties, and then the national government. Once you make it a part of the national government, then the national government owns it, and now it doesn't serve them equitably. That's one problem. The other problem is that the treasury is money. When you put it in the national government, you take the power of the purse, power of the money away from Parliament, and you put it into the presidency. And when you mix money and power, you get an emperor. So once you have this emperor in place, whom we call the president, then the MPs are toothless bulldogs. They have no teeth. And because they want, instead of the way the design is that development should be through the budget, mm-hmm, the budget becomes useless, because the budget was designed the budget was to control money. The money is locked away. You make a budget. Then to get that money out from and the treasury is controlled by professionals. To get that money out, it has to be in the budget, and the control of budget has to approve.
Okay.
But once you already have the treasury with the president, so the president already has the money, he doesn't need that budget. He doesn't need that approval. So the president then spends money on the whims, at his own whims. That's why you'll find now that if the president was to appear in a place, assume the president came to my place in Busia, you'll find all the 7 MPs and the women rep coming around him, forgetting to have done a budget in Parliament,
okay,
and beginning telling the president, we need a bridge here, we need some road here, we need something here. And the president will come up and say, when PS, can you allocate this? Can you give them, we shall do this, we shall do that, we shall do the other. So everything becomes arbitrary and confused. So to access development, then you have to be close to power. And power, you don't approach power standing straight, you approach power bowing. Then you get a subservient parliament. So to cure that, we must go back and create an independent treasury, take it away from the executive, lock money away, put it under professional national treasurer with security of tenure. And then to get money out of that, it must be in the budget, and the controller budget must approve it before money can leave. That way, the country will sober up.
Then the question would be, would we do that through a constitutional amendment? Do we need that?
No, the Constitution requires it.
Okay. So
we just need to create an act. If you look at the wording of Article 225, it requires Parliament by an act to establish the national treasury. We have not done that. We just need to do that. That's all we need to do, create an independent treasury. Lock our money away, take money away from the president. Keep money there. Then they let the president become a civil servant, not an emperor. And that's what will happen. You know what is happening in this country is that we are like people who have got a broken tap in the house. And some of you we are engaged in a debate where people are fighting, that what we need is to get somebody who can do very good mopping. So you can let the tap leak, but let somebody who can give mopping. Instead of saying what we need is a plumber to come and fix the tap.
Okay, fair enough, Senator. Just one more question in regards to that. And there's the concern about IMF, like you mentioned. How entrenched is IMF in government policies that we are seeing today here in the country?
Even that Public Finance Management Act I'm telling you is the IMF. Go and pick the Public Finance Management Act of Zambia, I come all the whole way to Uganda and compare it with that of Kenya. It's like a copy and paste. They have no regard for the Constitution. They do things their own way. And their interest is to make sure that they make money for their... First of all, the IMF itself is a money-making machine. It's not a charity. It's a bank. It makes money. Two, their shareholders control the Western economies. And they make money from the third world. So they create, when they look around like vultures, so when they see a country which is not being managed well, they zoom in, and they come up with so-called structural adjustment programs. They will not charge interest whatever. The way they make their money is by coming up with the requirements that make it impossible for the country to thrive. Like they impose heavy taxes like they've done in Kenya. They tell the guy, then they demand that money should not be used on social services and what have you. Let education fall, let health fall, let things fall. Pay debt. And most of that debt is debt that they contract outside the strictures of the law.
Talking about debt and all these funds that we get from international bodies and other countries, there are concerns about how this money is spent, and that takes us to the issue of corruption, Senator. Now, one of the key concerns is that corruption is the root of all our problems as a country, or most of our problems as a country. I'll take you to an issue between the mandated bodies that are given the chance or the will to fight this issue. And that is, of course, the EACC, there's the ODPP. But in recent weeks, we've seen the EACC, agitate and, call on Parliament to give them prosecutorial powers. The same with NCAC. And there's somewhat concern that there are issues within the ODPP and them being the weakest link in the fight against graft and, all cases surrounding that. When these agencies, the EACC, the NCAC, call for or agitate for prosecutorial powers, what does it say about the state of the ODPP here in the country? Are they really not taking the mandate, or is the issue not ODPP, but rather weak evidence being provided? First
of all, I object to the EACC having power to prosecute. A prosecutor should be independent from an investigator, so that even the devil has his due. Even the person being suspected cannot be fixed. The prosecutor has to be independent. So the question of EACC being given prosecutorial powers for me is a no-go area. The problem, again, is we are missing the point. When Mr. Haji was the DPP, he developed something called the power to charge. Okay? That power to charge. Then he said, in the way things were used to work, the investigative agencies, be there the police or the EACC, could investigate, come up with a crime, draw up a charge sheet, open charges before a magistrate, then the person will be taken to take a plea. If you take a plea and you plead you are guilty, then a sentencing will take place. There will be no prosecution. But if you say you are not guilty, then the DPP comes in to begin prosecuting. So this paper, it's going to find the correct word for the paper. It is not the power to charge, it's called the decision to charge. So the DPP says, bring me all those files. I will decide whether to charge or not. So that decision to charge is the one we should be fighting. Let the EACC fight for the power to charge. Go to court and open a charge sheet and accuse somebody that you have investigated this guy. He have found him with this, you charge him before a magistrate. Let the person take a plea. The DPP can come in and review the thing. That's why he has got the power even to terminate the trial or to ask for more evidence.
Okay.
But to make the DPP the clearing house for who appears in court is to, first of all, put too much power in an individual. And with our culture is to create room for rent seeking. And that's now the problem that has come. It's not that the EACC should take over the power of the DPP, no. Let the EACC do their work. Let them charge and prosecute, and then the witnesses in court. So you find that the DPP insisting on being the one to make the decision to charge, but when they make the decision to charge, when you go to court, who goes to the witness box? It's the police. That police constable who has investigated a matter and said that this matter needs to go to court should be free to draw up a charge sheet. In fact, even the law still requires them to sign a charge sheet. The DPP cannot sign a charge sheet. Still require them to sign a charge sheet because they're the ones who are going to be put to task to prove the case. So the DPP cannot be the one making the decision to charge, and he does not appear in the witness box. He's a prosecutor, and a prosecutor is an officer of the court. If you look at Article 157 that establishes the DPP, his work is in court, his life is in court. But the DPP has gotten a very big life outside court, so he has sucked the oxygen out of the EACC, he has sucked the oxygen out of the police, the DCI, the DCI or the OCS, and then he's abusing that power by not charging criminals because he says the decision to charge is his. To make matters worse, he even goes further to impose fines on people without people appearing in court. And there's even one case I'm prosecuting right now. If you remember the NYS saga, where there was that theft through the NYS, the central bank did follow that money. It investigated several banks. It found them culpable. It fined them for money laundering or stuff like that. Then it handed the criminal component, it handed it to the DCI and told the DCI, investigate these banks, and if you find that they are culpable, prosecute them criminally. The DCI investigated. He found that the banks were culpable, and because of the decision to charge, he handed the file over to the DPP. The DPP took the files, and instead of charging the banks, he fined the banks a lot of money. And this one, I came to learn of it during the COVID, when people were donating. The DPP donated 900 million shillings. And I said, how can the DPP donate this money? That's when I followed and I found that they have got a way, they've got a fund within the DPP where they can impose fines on people whom they don't want to charge, that a plea bargain happens outside court, they charge somebody and they are paid money. So that is the rot that we're dealing with.
So how do we fix it? Because there's the issue of selective application of the law. There's the issue of high-profile cases being dropped without enough reasons. There's the
solution is this: let the police be free to charge criminals. Let the EACC be free to charge criminals. Once they appear in court, then the prosecution takes over where they don't plead where they don't plead guilty. The DPP takes over. It begins prosecuting. You saw the other day, there was another case, just a high-profile case the other day of Mr. Evans Kidero. I think last week, the DPP tried to withdraw that case. The magistrate refused. It was in the papers. I read something like that. I could be wrong, but I read something like that in the papers. Earlier on, there was, I think, another one case that affected a cabinet minister. They were trying to withdraw the case. Again, the court refused. That's how it is supposed to work. But if these charges are not reached to court, today, the way matters are, with the decision to charge vested in the DPP as the clearing house of who gets prosecuted and who doesn't get prosecuted, then the powerful will just walk free. So me, I ask the EACC and I ask the police, the EACC should not look for power to prosecute. They should look for their power to charge to be given back to them, so that they can go to court and charge people for criminal offenses. Then the DPP can step in and then they become witnesses. That way we balance it out, because then they cannot come and fix you. If you give somebody too much power, the chances of abuse are there. We should not lose the checks and balances where a prosecutor and an investigator are separated. So that's how I would look at it. But the decision to charge, that document needs to leave to be destroyed.
So indeed, if I'm getting you right, the ODPP in itself is not as independent as it should be, because there's interference from outside, from the powers that be.
The interference is basically the way they are chosen. You'll find there's a lot of handpicking of who becomes who in this country. Mm-hmm. So most of, not just the DPP, all these independent
bodies, agencies,
and even commissions. You see the commissions. Most of the commissions are dead. They are virtually not functioning because they have been packed with the lookalikes of those who are in power. So they create a tribal arrangement, not tribal in the sense of ethnicity, mm-hmm. but a tribe in terms of habit. So there's a tribe of crooks that then comes there and they just capture the state.
Okay, fair enough.
All of it goes back to the question of there being an emperor, called the president being an emperor. The president controls too much money and he can use that money the way it wants. And we must not stop looking for good people to be presidents. Let us fix the presidency so that even if a bad man comes there, he cannot hurt our country. Let us design the presidency for evil people and not stop looking for good people to be presidents. When we have designed an evil presidency to be in charge, then we begin looking for angels to become presidents. Let us design a system whereby even evil people become presidents, because they are Kenyans. They can become president, but their effect will be minimal because they are in a straitjacket.
Okay, fair enough. Talking about anybody being president and those who are angling to be presidents, you are among those people who are expected to, of course, give that a shot in 2027. But we're taking a brief breather. We'll be back to talk about your presidential ambitions. Of course, the committee that you selected or appointed, its time is lapsing, I believe, next month. So we'll be back to talk about that, as well as other issues in the country, and more specifically the issue of the protests that we're expecting tomorrow, and also the issue of the cropping culture of Gunism here in the country. That will be after this short break. Don't go away.